There you go. Gray and rainy is never a good sign. Probably means it fits in with those guys down at Stockley Park. Because I'd say they like if there was ever a whole room of people that probably want it to like that could star in the next like Snickers commercial. You know, they used to have those NFL commercials with the want to get away when the guy would make like the terrible call and then he
Yeah.
would just eating a Snickers. Like I feel like if they had had a camera on Michael Oliver about a half hour after the match, he probably would have been having a want to get away moment.
Yeah, there was some rough ones this week for sure. But Oliver, I think Coot obviously didn't bathe himself in any glory either. But
Yeah, we'll get to that one. I think that's the biggest one. So why don't we start our as we do each and every week here on this program, we do a VAR match weekend review. I think this week's could have probably been an entire program. Last week had quite a few as well. So we're going to go quick hitting, especially if we agree on them, which I'm going to go out on a limb and think we're going to agree on most of these because I don't think there was anything too glaring. But let's start with the biggest match of the weekend, Liverpool versus Arsenal. There was a brief red card review against Virgil van Dijk early in the match against Kai Havertz, basically for kicking back at him, getting him with his studs on his ankle, similar to about what Beckham did to get sent off in that World Cup famously. Paul, do you think this was to make sure they took a look at it, or do you think this was brushed away completely because the game has changed and that is no longer a red card where maybe it was even 5 or 10 years ago in this game?
I think it's changing the fact that anything below the jawline is looked at completely differently. But I think sort of this neck region up, you can't get away with that anymore. But I think anything below that, I think they're letting that stuff go now, unless it's egregious or there's some sort of force behind it.
Yeah, I for me, it's not a red card because it's not violent. He's lucky that the ref doesn't see it and think it's a petulant act of violence and just sends him off for it, just to in the old Lazar Markovic finger flick to the cheek. But that was a European game and not a Premier League game, and I think that always weighs into it because there are a lot of these calls we'll talk about this weekend. I think if they were happening in a European competition, it may be a different story, both from the on-field decision and what the VAR might do. I will say it is petulant, though. And as a Liverpool supporter, and we'll talk more about this, I think, in the Monday night podcast that we do, I don't like the look from my club captain 6 minutes into what is the biggest game, even giving a chance. Why even, it just seems silly to me and almost beneath him. And it almost felt like he knew they were in for a fight and wanted to get under their skin a little bit. And to me, that's not come as you like, as the song may say.
No, I agree with that. I mean, definitely not the look you want there from Verge as your captain. Yeah, I can't disagree with anything there.
So let's move over to the other side of the center back defense for Liverpool. There was a penalty claim and a review for the Konate foul or potential foul on Martinelli in the box. It kind of had Trent involved as well, and I think that's what kind of, to me, made it look initially like it might be clumsy and there might be something in it. When you first saw it live time, were you worried that with Anthony Taylor of all people on the pitch, that there was not going to be a problem to point to the spot in that instance?
Look, I'm worried anytime somebody goes down in the box against Liverpool or any team that I'm rooting for in this day and age, right? So, yeah, for sure, definitely worried there. I think at the end of the day, though, when you look at this thing, once you slow it down and once you really look at this, I think at the end of the day, Konate wins the ball first and is coming at an angle where he's not endangering the player. I think the rest is sort of incidental contact that comes when there's two, opposing forces coming together at that speed.
Yeah, I felt like it was actually the proper use of VAR because I think they look at the situation, they see that he gets the ball first. they understand that there's not a reckless play or a challenge that could put the player in danger, and he doesn't come through the player even though he gets the ball. He literally comes from the side. He kind of comes down a little bit. It's awkward. I think Trent being there almost made you question, like, does Trent hit him? Is there another form of contact there?
Yeah.
Which there clearly isn't. And I just think it's the right way to quickly look at something, clear it, and move it on. And it was, it was a brilliant day overall, in my opinion, by Kanate. And this was just one more instance of him really covering for Trent throughout the match and protecting him for the fact that he easily could have been lit up for a couple. But we'll get deeper into that. Obviously, a talking point we've seen a lot of are these denial of goal scoring opportunity. You had the one against Evanilson for Saliba. He gets sent off after a VAR review. You have the one last week where Jota gets taken down and subsequently injured against Chelsea. It's just a yellow card. We kind of agreed, I think, to the difference between them. And then we fast forward to this week, and you have Crystal Palace versus Tottenham, and Ismail Sarr basically gets played in. We all know Van de Ven is an extremely fast human, but that can't come into play when you talk about he was the last defender who takes the player down. I've seen a lot of different opinions on this one. Did you have a chance to see it? And do you think Van de Ven was lucky? On-field decision has to stand? Or are we getting back into that inconsistent use of the same rules?
So I don't know if it's inconsistent use of the same rules. What I think the problem is that when you try to legislate this game into oblivion, the problem is like no matter what you do in this game, there are going to be situations that are subjective, right? And to me, the biggest subjective, like the biggest call that like is going to have the most subjectivity to it is one of these where you're trying to take multiple things into consideration, the pace of play, the direction of play, and then you're basically making a judgment call based on what you see, the positioning of those players on the field, and the players involved. Because for this one, like they're going to use, I've seen the fact that they're using the direction of play as the reason that this wasn't a straight red. And to me, that's really subjective based on the ability of the attacking player involved, right? Like, I think to me, regardless of the direction of this play, you can't tell me it's not a clear goal scoring opportunity. So, did they get it right in application? Probably, because I don't think there's anything here you can really overturn this on for clear and obvious. But the problem is, it's just so subjective. To me, I think Van de Ven's extremely lucky here.
Yeah, I felt like he was very lucky boy, and he got saved by the fact that it was called a yellow on the field. And if it was called a red on the field, there's no going back from it. Like it, and to that alone, is why I hate this use of VAR in this way, because I do feel in some ways if that's we need these officials to make that call on the field. And I think too often they're able to hide behind having VAR there in similar ways to how NBA officials now do late in games and MLB officials. I think all sports, once you institute instant replay of any kind, it makes the decision-making process for on-field officials that much easier to hide around an excuse. So let's go over to the Chelsea Newcastle match. Interesting match. I have a feeling we'll talk a little bit more about this match as well as Chelsea as the show goes on. Nkunku's dive, I mean, the penalty that Nkunku wins in the box against Dan Burn. It's awarded on the field and quickly, and in my opinion, rightly removed by VAR. My question for you is: one, did you agree with the decision to disallow that penalty? And two, if VAR has to get involved and it's a situation like that, should it not be an automatic yellow for a simulation, or at least some form of like repercussion, because to me there wasn't enough contact for him to go down, and he acted like it was a penalty, two arms flailing, rolling on his stomach. That should be a card in retrospect for me.
Yes and yes, because I don't think that we can have, half of our show every week be about refereeing and talk about how the state of the game needs to improve overall and the state of refereeing needs to improve overall if we're not discouraging these types of things that make refereeing substantially harder, right? Like, and I think this is the number one thing that makes it very, very tough for a lot of referees is the idea of simulation in the game is literally high reward, low risk. Like there is no there's very, very little chance that you're going to get a straight yellow diving in this game anymore unless it's so blatantly obvious you shouldn't be doing it anyway because you're not good at it. Like I think, and that's the problem is like there's no incentive for this to go out of the game, and it only makes the refereeing more difficult.
Yeah, and I think one of the players for Newcastle got a yellow card basically for dissent for the penalty. And all he said to the ref was, you have to look at it. We didn't touch him. There's no way it's a foul. And he gave him a yellow card for dissent. And then when it's proven that he was right, they don't take that yellow card away. And the league says, well, that was for his conduct towards the match official, and therefore it can't be rescinded. Yeah. So, like, this is just where they hide behind all of this. And then you look at the Bournemouth match where Semenyo gets a yellow card for a dive on the field, and then it goes to a 4.5-minute review where some believe that there's absolutely contact, but they don't take the yellow away from him for the dive, even though they acknowledge there was contact, but not enough to award a penalty. Like, this is how twisted I think these officials get. Also in that Villa game gave us the always awkward 8.5-minute review to figure out if a ball was out of bounds or not, which I think is never possible to tell by any angle. At what point will they either change the rule about how far a ball has to be out to be in or out ball, or will they put microchips in all balls and get, basically goal line technology around the pitch? Because it feels to me like these ones on the touchline occasionally are called right, and the ones on the sidelines are never correct. And I think you could make an argument like, why is VAR able to get involved if they don't know they have it right fully with cameras?
Yeah, I mean, and not to introduce logic into this, but my logic would dictate if you don't have a camera angle that covers all angles and you can't get that call based on the video evidence correct, then you should probably have some sort of ball technology inside of it that does, right? I mean, makes the most logical sense to me. Because the thing that I don't like about that is like, they're like, oh, you can see daylight between the edge and the ball, but it's like, that doesn't fucking matter. It's where the side of that ball is. If it's over the line and you're looking at it at an angle, you could still see green paint through it, but that ball could still technically be touching based on the, the shape of it. And that's like, I think we've committed to getting granular about getting these calls right, and we've got away from the subjective nature of calling football and the subjectivity of it. We've tried to get this thing granular. If you're going to get it granular, you can't, you have to consistently do that across the board. You can't just pick calls that you're like, well, this is as good as we could get, because it's not.